Hey, it's my friends. Well, good morning, everybody. I have a little bit of a interview for you. I'm going to introduce today. It's actually a two-part interview. We're going to hear from the same person 2 days in a row, just kind of cut it down in terms of time a little bit. Um, you know, Here's something just to think about. If I had never gone fishing before, ever, never gone fishing before, and then I went to, say, I don't know, Tyson's to look, or Walmart to look at their fishing equipment, I got to be honest with you, it would sort of overwhelm me. I would have no idea. And I don't know if you've fished or never fished, but sometime if you never have, go to the fishing department or pick some other thing you've never done before, and then go and look at all the options that you have and all the ways that it can be done. And I'm going to guess you'd feel like I would feel a little bit overwhelmed. If I really wanted to learn how to fish, one of the things that I would do is find somebody who already knows how to fish. Now, I grew up fishing, and so I know a lot about fishing, but I grew up fishing in Michigan, where there's a lot of lakes and ponds. I never fished in rivers and streams when I was a kid. And so when I moved to Iowa, I didn't know how to do it. And so I never really took up fishing in Iowa. And if I ever decided to, I would have to not do what I had always known, fishing in Michigan in lakes and ponds, and I would have to find out how to fish in rivers. And I guess that's a little bit of the analogy of the situation we're in right now, where school is not going to be open anymore, and now everybody has to homeschool, or that's what it's being called. If I want to learn to fish in rivers, I'm going to find some old guy from around here, somebody that's done it for a long time, and say, hey, can you teach me how to do this? Because I could try to figure it out myself, but I'm not going to do that well at it. Well, we are in a situation where everybody has to homeschool. And as it turns out, whatever you may think about homeschooling, whatever you thought about it before this happened, whatever your opinions are about it and about schools, there are people who have been doing this for years. There's a whole network of people that have encountered the challenges you're encountering for the first time. They are essentially experienced fishermen in the river for a bunch of people that have been fishing in ponds, fishing in lakes. And so we have an opportunity, again, whatever you may think about homeschooling, to benefit from those people, from their experience, from what they know. Not because we necessarily want to homeschool at any point ourselves in the future, but because we must now. And so today is the first part of an interview with a lady who is the Region 8 representative for the Homeschool Iowa organization. And Region 8, just so you know, is Dubuque, Delaware, Jones, and Jackson County. She's a very experienced homeschool mother who raised 4 children as homeschooled kids, all of whom have gone on to college and have graduated. And there's a little bit more to her story as well, but I'll let the interview speak for itself. So please enjoy this interview today with a very experienced homeschooler and see if you can benefit from some of the experiences, not only of her, but then maybe reach out to other experienced homeschool people as we kind of learn how to fish in these new waters. Enjoy this interview. We have a very special guest today. She is the Region 8 representative for Homeschool Iowa. And I'll put this in the notes and you can access it, but you can go to homeschooliowa.org to find out more information. She is a veteran homeschool mother who homeschooled 4 children through graduation, and now they are all, except one, graduated from college, and that one will graduate at the end of this year, and has moved on to support and mentor other parents who are homeschooling. There is a network of people like this around the state that really want to be helpful, and so we have an opportunity to talk with one of those people today. So not only is she the representative for Region 8, not only is she a veteran homeschool mom, but she's my wife. It's my wife, Teresa Ott, who's on our interview today. How exciting is that? So Teresa, that was a long intro, but welcome to our interview today.
Hello. Hi.
Well, what we want to do is take advantage of the fact that you have a lot of experience with homeschooling. And as I know that U of I have talked about this, we recognize that there's a real difference between what's happening with parents whose kids have been sent home versus those who choose to homeschool their kids. And that this is not a choice at all that any of these parents made, but now they're sort of stuck with it. I think maybe a good place to start and an area of curiosity is, what was the process that led you to decide to homeschool your kids? How did you go through that process, and what were some of the factors involved?
Well, the backstory is I have a good friend, childhood friend, who has a daughter who's about a year older than our first child. And my friend Linda, she started talking about homeschooling when her daughter was about 5. That meant that our oldest, Allison, about 4. You can do the math. And she started talking about it, and I thought, no, that's not a good idea. One of us is, Jim's going to come home from work one day, and one of us is going to be dead. That's a really bad idea. So, so as she grew, as our kids grew, and we kept in touch, I was always curious about it. I asked, how's your homeschooling going? Well, then as Allison, and at that point we had a lot more kids, started reaching the age, like middle school age, although at the time they were still on the junior high model. But as she started to reach the middle school age, and all that stuff that was, I assumed, happened in high school started happening with girls in 5th grade, I started thinking, I just really don't want this for my daughter. I didn't like junior high. So I started asking my friends, female girlfriends, if they liked junior high, and 8 out of 10 hated it. One woman said, well, it's better than high school. And one said, oh, I love junior high. So that got me to thinking that I really did not want to put my daughter into the junior high system. And that was kind of the beginning of it.
So you went ahead and you brought the oldest child, and that was our daughter, Allison, and she was in 6th grade and going into 7th grade. The other kids continued in the elementary school, and then gradually they came home, so that our youngest, who will graduate from college this year, he never attended a public school at all. What are some of the lessons that you learned about bringing children home from the school? What were some of the transitions you went through, both as a parent and then trying to coordinate their education?
Well, I'm a researcher at heart, and so in those couple of years when I was thinking about homeschooling, I would ask, like, what do you think about homeschooling? I'm thinking about homeschooling. It took me a good year to have the courage to step into, we're going to homeschool. And in that time, though, I was doing a lot of reading about how to home educate and how to, just what the history of school. And now is a really good time for me to remind people that when our family started in the early 2000s, the internet was a baby, and there was still very little support, online support. And so all this reading was books and online support groups that suggested books, but there weren't such things as blogs and stuff like that. I don't know if that's helpful.
Yeah, no, that's really good. So as we look at the situation that people are in now, one of the things that we can talk about is that when people choose to homeschool, they go through a process that you talked about of investigating and thinking about and making the decision. And I think one of the things that I've heard you talk about in other situations and that we've discussed is that even for people who choose to homeschool, the transition is a challenging one. Like, it's hard for the parents, it can be hard for the kids, and really understanding or getting comfortable with what you're doing. What's a time frame that you would suggest would be fairly normal for homeschool families that make the choice to do it? How long does it take to get comfortable?
The conventional wisdom in homeschoolers is that you need to have 1 month per year that a child was in the public school system to do what is commonly known as decompressing or detoxing, meaning just come home and get out of the habit of thinking like a schooler. And I will say that it is by far more difficult for the parent to do that than it is the kid.
Yeah, and is that, just to clarify, and I know that this was true in my own experience, because I love school and I love the being at school and I love the system of school and the school worked for me, but because as an adult I was raised in school, and I guess you were as well, our minds are so geared to how school works that we think we have to reproduce that in our homes.
Oh, yes. And so, as I said, I did a lot of research, and I didn't dislike school, but school wasn't great for me. I mean, it was just something I did. I didn't love it. I went to a very big school. There were a lot of opportunities, but it was very easy for a B student like me to just sort of get lost. And so I was not really interested. I was never interested in recreating school at home. So it wasn't so much like, oh yeah, I felt like I needed to have desks, and then you realize, oh, those don't work. And you need to have the Pledge of Allegiance, and oh no, that doesn't work. But the concept that there is a right way to do it and a wrong way to do it, even for someone who doesn't want to recreate school, is very, very hard to get beyond.
Wow, that is I think really powerful, because I think a lot of parents right now are wrestling with, I want to do this the right way, as opposed to, I want to do it. I think I'm hearing you say, I want to do it in a way that works for our family, for my kids, for our relationship. Is that the right concept?
Yes, exactly. And with that, in school, we are never taught. I mean, we're never given the information that someday you might need to be able to do this same thing for your own children, right? We're not taught in school how to teach our kids.
Right.
So the concept that home educators know once they know it, but they don't know that there are so many different ways to provide information to a child, to your own child, that might work and it might not work. People with a bunch of kids just naturally know that Johnny is excited by this and Susie is excited by that, but it's hard to put into practice the concept the way I think is not the way that Joey learns best, or Allison, and those are not, obviously I'm mentioning our own children. Is that sort of what you were asking?
Yeah, no, I think that's really good, because, and I love this idea that we weren't taught how to teach. And there's even something that's sort of inherent, and I've talked about this in other contexts for those of you out here who've listened to me, that we've developed this idea that in order for children to learn, they must be taught. And we've forgotten that children neurologically, that's all their brains do is learn. And in many cases, children don't have to be taught as much as they have to be given a context in which they can learn to the maximum of their particular style and abilities, which is, I think, one of the advantages that veteran homeschoolers would say homeschooling has over school. Am I saying that right?
Yes.
So one of the things that you also talk about, and I've heard talked about, is the difference between education and schooling. That home educators in some ways resist homeschooling because they're not just doing school at home, but they actually have a different philosophy of education. Could you talk briefly about kind of the homeschool community, how they view the difference between home education versus homeschooling?
Yeah, I picked up on that briefly thing. Because this is difficult, because this really is the foundation of it, because people who school at home, who have the mindset of schooling at home, often get frustrated and put their kids back in school because it's just not working. And people have to be humble enough to realize when their reality is crashing into their fantasy, and to realize that their fantasy is wrong. So the home, I don't know who started calling it homeschooling, but we veterans hate that word, because schools are for fish, and children do not come home to sit in a school. And so I don't like schooling. And even when we did our work, I didn't call it their schoolwork, I called it their schooly work. So that's just a quirky thing for me. So I will throw around home education, and I get people upset about that. But educating your child is completely different than schooling your child. And in fact, old people understand the concept of the school of hard knocks. You just did something really stupid, but you learned from it. And so you learned something. I got off track, but that because we parents only know school, we don't, it's very difficult to put our head around how else to do it. So you can read and you can read and you can read and you can know people who do things differently, but in times of stress, we will always default to what we know. So there's the school stuff. And certainly I know people who started off homeschooling with buying desks. They had a schoolroom, they had a flag, they did the Pledge of Allegiance, they had their Bible time, they did their prayer, just like school, but that didn't last very long. Right. But in that situation, people have already decided that getting their kid out of the school is the point. And they're realizing that, okay, I need to figure out how else to do it. These people who've been foisted into this situation, that's completely different.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's the whole point of what we're doing this for. And what I'm going to focus on and a lot of the things I'm going to do for the Bellevue videos is this recognition that you didn't choose this, but it was chosen for you. Now, how can you benefit and use it as a time to grow stronger in your relationship with your kids, to understand your own kids better? A lot of times our culture has taken understanding of children out of the hands of parents. So I'm going to do a little teaching right here, but like as parents, we've been told for so long in our culture that you don't actually understand your children. Daycare workers understand your infants and toddlers better than you do. Preschool teachers understand your kids better than you do. And we've sort of crippled parents' confidence that they know their children better than any other person. And even more importantly, they love their children more than any other person. But with that lack of confidence, often parents are ceding all of the responsibility for instruction, for teaching, even for time management to so-called professionals. And this is an opportunity not for parents to say, okay, well, I never want my kid to go to school again necessarily, but to say, wow, it's my kid and I actually do know them better. I actually love them more. And perhaps we can create an environment that is actually productive and helping us to grow stronger as a family and ultimately make a stronger individual out of my son and daughter. That was probably too much for me to say since I'm supposed to be interviewing you, but that's just what was in my head.
That's
for
okay.
A second. All right. Well, I told you that there was a little bit more to the story, and I've mentioned before that my wife and I homeschooled our kids, and there were lots of reasons and factors that went into that. So I'm definitely a person who has feet in both of these worlds, although certainly I'm not the expert that my wife is, and I haven't been dealing with lots and lots of people contacting her about what do we do, what do we do. Well, if you want to be one of those people, go to homeschooliowa.org and go to the representative section, and that you will find for Region 8, Teresa Ott, and you can click on her contact information, and she will be happy to speak with you and just kind of give you some encouragement that, you know, you can do this. And you can do it in a way that you can feel successful about what you're doing right now. You can feel successful about what you're doing with your kids as you help them adjust to this really strange situation we're in. Tomorrow we'll be back with part 2 of the interview as Teresa goes into more detail about some of the factors that are associated with homeschooling, some of the mindset that goes with it that can help you feel a little bit more comfortable about the situation we're in. We'll see you tomorrow.